Alden, great connecting with you, my man. I appreciate your time. The purpose of this is I'm having conversations with people people that I know and respect who are good leaders, and I've got even personal experience with you from the time in the Navy. So what I want to do first is introduce you a little bit and why I think you're so interesting, and then really it's going to be talking a little bit about your own development as a leader, some of the challenges that you had to overcome, how it's helped you become who you are today. And for those of you who don't know you, I think a lot of people do know you, Alden, obviously. But where do I start? Naval Academy, class of 91, 2 years ahead of me. Correct me if I'm wrong, you were recruited there and you were so good at crew that during plebe summer, you actually went away to compete and actually came back for plebe summer, which is not something I've ever heard of before. Went on to be a SEAL, and subsequently went to business school, put yourself out there as an entrepreneur, started the Perfect Pushup. What was the name of the company you eventually ran? It was
Perfect Fitness.
Perfect Fitness. Sold that, and now he's out speaking and inspiring people across the country. And so I think you have a really interesting story to tell. What did I miss in introducing you that you think is really interesting, in particular, maybe where you grew up and what helped you get to the academy in the first place?
I'd say the biggest things you missed are that I have failed about 10 times more than I've succeeded on any single thing that I've gotten known for. As you mentioned, I do a lot of speaking, and my manager has me do this sizzle reel that's about 2.5 minutes long, and I call it the I love me reel, right? Oh, he did this and he did this and he did this. And then I come up on stage, and the first thing I want all audiences to know, I was like, you see all those things? You don't hear anything about all the failures, all the trials and tribulations, all the deep, dark valleys of doubt that you have to go through to do a transition from one of these things to the next. And to me, I think that's where all the growth is. Right? It's through all the grind, and you know this grind. God knows I've watched you do it on the wrestling mat with just exemplary
A few years ago.
awesomeness. Yeah, but it was awesome. And, I think the only other thing I'd mention is that my greatest achievement is being a father. My 4 boys, they're now 16, 18, 21, and 23. And if I ever get stuck writing, or if I ever get stuck on thinking what I should do next, I think about, well, how could I do something that might help my boys?
Yeah, man. Well, where did you learn that from? Your own father, other mentors you had growing up?
Of all the podcasts I've ever been on, you are the first one to ask me that question. And I have to tell you, I was very lucky. My very first leadership mentor was my mom. One of the things that I was stricken with early in life was that I was severe asthmatic, and she had been with me by my side through all these different trials and tribulations of having pneumonia a lot as a kid, and I was bedridden a lot, and I went to this uh, pulmonary doctor in the great big city of Worcester, Massachusetts. That's not that big of a city, but
Like how big? Yeah, let's compare on that.
I think it's
I'll
like
tell you my photo
50,000 or
size.
something like that. I mean, I grew up in a town of 10,000. Maybe Worcester's 100,000, but it's not that big of a city, right? And that's where I got diagnosed with this asthma, and I should lead a less active lifestyle. And the doctor was like, "Oh, he should play the game of chess." And my chin dropped down to my chest, and my mom's like, "Why don't you go wait in the lobby? I'll talk to the good doctor from here." And I'm sitting in the lobby, and when she finally comes out, she's in the offensive mom position, hands on her hips, kicks my foot. She's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I had huge crocodile tears. I remember making puddles on this brown linoleum floor. And I was like, "Mom, chess? I'm terrible at checkers. How am I gonna play chess, right? And my mind had already gone there. She had these long French cuticle nails. They were like velociraptor claws, and she'd dig them into my forearm, and she'd be like, "Now you listen to me. Nobody defines what you can or can't do but you. Now I'll get you that medicine, but you gotta decide what you can do. Now let's go." And I really credit mom for that one, right? And then dad, dad was working, but dad was equally supportive. And so when I scored against my own basketball team for my own first basket, he's like, "Hey, you scored." And then when I scored against my own team in hockey, "Hey, you scored. Try another sport." And I tried it in lacrosse, scored against my own team there. I was a goalie. Very easy to score against yourself there. Did it on soccer.
Yeah, as a goalie, sure.
Against 4 different teams, right? Against my own team. And then I found rowing, but mom and dad just keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. And it was that kind of resilience and grit that I had realized was so successful in helping me go after my dreams that I wanted to be that for my boys. So there's the answer to your question.
I never knew that about you having asthma as a kid. So besides just the mental fortitude and the support of your mom to say, "Don't take no for an answer," was this your perspective is something you just outgrew as well physically? I mean, how'd you overcome that to go be so stellar at crew and then go be a frogman?
Well, I was taking medicine for a long time. And in SEAL training, I got to tell you, I got pulled out of the water in second phase when we were doing the 3.5 mile swim, and my lungs were filling up with blood. And they pull me out. I'm aspirating all this blood, and they get me to the hospital, and I have a blood test, and they realize that I have an antigen in my blood. They raid my room, and they find this drug. And the drug I was taking was called Theodore, which was a vascular dilator. And now they understand more about vascular dilation and cold water. And it vasculates you so well that it opens your lungs up for fluid. And so I got pulled out of my class. I was told to get dropped. They're like, "You're not supposed to be here. You're taking asthma medication." And I was like, "No, no, no, no. That's a performance enhancing drug." That's what I was doing. They didn't believe me, rightfully so. And I got methacholine challenged, pulled out for a week. Well, then I got pulled out for 7 weeks, but I got pulled out for the week because they were trying to drop me. And then they allowed me to stay after I passed. I didn't know what to do. I'd been taking the medication for 10 years. I kept telling myself I wasn't an asthmatic, but I kept taking the medicine. And I decided I'd stop taking the medicine. And I went down to that local little white church off of Orange Avenue, and I just went in and I started to pray because I was kicked, and I was like, "Well, what the hell am I going to do?" And um, that is the first time I really discovered faith. And I made a deal with a big man. I was like, "Hey, I'm going to stop taking this, and if you, if this works, I'm going to talk to you every day." I didn't know what else to do, right?
Mhm.
And at the same time, I also started giving back and going to Easter seals and teaching quadriplegics how to swim. You don't teach them to swim; you just swim them. And
Yeah, I can imagine.
and after that, I didn't have any more problems.
So you did that and you were doing the teaching out in
Yeah,
Coronado while you're on
yeah.
the boats?
For the
Wow.
7 weeks until I got back.
Hmm. Yeah, you probably didn't
No,
have a lot
I
of
didn't
time
have any
after
time
that.
after that. I tell you that story because I actually talk about it in my third book about the purpose of faith. And the faith that I'm referring to here is the first definition in the dictionary is having 100% confidence in someone or something other than yourself. The second one is about religious doctrine. And, you and I experienced a whole bunch of faith with each other in our teams and our platoons when you go do something. And I think that's the greater job of a leader is to be that representative of faith for other people when you're asking to go beyond what they originally thought was possible. Because it's a scary time, right? And and that's where we need leadership. We need leadership when we're bringing this group together and we're trying to do something we can't do by ourselves. And we're also trying to do something we're not 100% sure we can do, but we have this belief in something that's greater and bigger and bolder, but it's way beyond the horizon, and we gotta believe in it before we can see it. And you have to have that level of trust. I think of trust squared as faith in your leader, in each other, to help you get out of your comfort zone and push you to new levels.
Would you say was it for you, Alden? Was it during your time at Buds when you first felt that, or was it rowing at Navy when you had to go to a dark place as a team, all 8 guys rowing together, or even something before that?
The very first time that I remember pushing myself and like I need to find some inner strength. It was as a sophomore in high school going through spring training for rowing, and my hands were all ripped apart, and I had them taped in like claws. And I remembered it hurt so badly that I was crying. But I remember going, oh, I'm soaking wet and I'm dripping sweat. No one will be able to tell that I'm crying, so I can just cry all I want. It doesn't matter. And I remember pulling on that oar because it was a particular race that decided if I won the race, I'd make the team as a sophomore, one of 2 sophomores at the school. And and I remember going, "You know what? This pain's temporary. It doesn't matter. I want this badly. I'm willing to push through it." That is one of the first instances I remember of leading myself through something like that.
So you mentioned leading yourself through something like that. One of the things you mentioned is faith. Yeah, I get it. Like even whether you're religious or not, faith in something, faith that we can do something, faith in each other. That brotherhood of the teams, and faith that hey, that guy's got your back. The faith that you're the parachute
Yeah.
rigger
Oh,
packed your reserve, all that kind of like, hey, okay, I'm going out. I packed my own, but that reserve is packed by someone I trust. I've got faith. So that first instance was faith in yourself or pushing through. Where was the first instance where it was you and your teammates, either as a leader or as a teammate, then pushing or pulling each other through a dark place, or what you had to do to accomplish something?
I think that one would have been discovered in Hell Week. I was the class leader of my class in Hell Week. We had lost our my senior officer right before Hell Week, and then we were down to 1 officer, me, and 33 enlisted that started Hell Week, which was a winter Hell Week. And I remember when we got down to 18 halfway through Hell Week, and that was the moment that we forged that faith together.
Yeah, it's interesting, Alden, you say that because I've had people ask me before, did you ever think about quitting during Hell Week? And I remember thinking, I never thought about quitting, but I remember thinking, boy, why am I doing this again? You question yourself and you just say, why are you doing this? And then you have to answer that question and say, well, I'm doing it because whatever that is. And the other thing that I also found too was, we like, misery loves company, strength in numbers. That's something that I think no one really gets through Hell Week themselves. Everyone has their moment where physically or otherwise they're just not feeling it, and you got to have your teammates pull you through.
That's so refreshing that you say that because I couldn't agree with you more. There was one moment where I thought about quitting. And the only reason I thought about it, the other moments were just like what you talked about. Like, oh, why am I doing this? I'm dipping low, right? I'm scraping the bottom. But the one moment was on Tuesday night. It's the middle of the night. It's raining outside. They had these puddles outside the chow hall, and they let everyone go into the chow hall but me. And they surround all the senior instructors surrounded me, and they were like, "Hey, Mills, it's time for you to quit. We're going to walk you over here to the truck. You're going to ring the bell." I'm like, "Why would I do that?" And he goes, "Sir, look at your class. You're down to 18. Why do you think so many have quit?" I was tired, right? I'd been up for 48 hours. I'm like, "I don't know. They just don't wanna be here, I guess." And they're like, "No, no, they quit because you're a terrible leader. And if you can't even lead your team through Hell Week, how do you think you're gonna lead them in a SEAL team? And by the way you're leading, you're gonna get SEALs killed. You don't want SEALs killed, do you? Do you wanna kill SEALs?" Right? And they kept coming at me with this negative hypothetical. And they're like, "So, sir, we know you don't want to kill SEALs. So therefore, if you don't want to kill SEALs and you're a bad leader, let's walk over here and ring the bell." And I remember picking up my foot, starting to move that one step towards the bell when everything slowed down. They're like, "Wait, whoa, whoa, Alden, stop for a second. You were the leader of you got elected by 75 of your classmates to be the captain of the crew. You got the leadership award at the Naval Academy. If you really are a bad leader, you got plenty of time to figure out how to be a better leader by the time you get out of training and go through the rest of your training. You don't fall for it." And I remember picking the foot up and then doing an about face and go, "I'm not quitting." And then all these guys, you could hear them. "Oh, I thought we had him. I thought we had him."
So when you went to the academy, did you know you wanted to go be a frogman?
I heard about it senior year. I had gone to a boarding school, and the boarding school I went to was actually one of the boarding schools the Naval Academy has used as a feeder for athletes, in particular for rowing. And so yeah, I didn't every generation in my family had served in some capacity, Air Force, Army, I don't we haven't had a Marine, but mostly Air Force and Army. And, uh, I I just thought it sounded interesting. I grew up on the water, spent my summers in Cape Cod, and I've been diving at a young age, but Marine Corps was the other area I'd looked at. But then once you got to the academy and you started to really understand what it meant, it became the natural selection for
Yeah, it's
me.
like a gravitational pull. That's what happened to me. I didn't know what
Yeah,
SEALs were before
100.
I grew up small town Iowa. I've got you beat on the small town. My hometown is less than 2,000.
Oh, yeah, you do. Yeah, you were probably, like, wrestling bulls and stuff. That's why you were
Yeah,
so
I mean,
big.
that's exactly what I did. Yeah. Well, we've been talking a little bit about leadership and, in buds and leading your guys to like get through a tough time. I want to pivot a little bit to your times in the teams. If you think about the commanding officers or other leaders that you learn from then in the next evolution of your evolution as a leader yourself, mentoring, developing others, learning how to inspire. I mean, certainly learn how to inspire in other times, but that next step in the evolution, like who comes to mind, and like what did you learn from them that you really remember that helped you continue to evolve as a really good leader?
That is a great question. And the first officer that comes to mind is Commander Lau. He was at SDV Team 2. I did 2 tours or 2 platoons at SDV Team 2, and I remember very specifically going out on my first set of my first deployment, and it was the night before my deployment, and there were 3 things that he drove home. 1, he wanted my letter, and I didn't know what he was talking about, and he wanted me to write a just in case letter, and told me that should I come back on my shield, that he wanted to have a letter from me that he could give to my next of kin. And then he said, "Hey, if it's not you coming back, but if it's one of your platoon mates, uh, you might be giving that flag to the next of kin. So you should ask them for a letter and write the letter." So That's when I got introduced to the just in case letter. So that was one. Number two, he would ask me all the time, Lieutenant Mills, do you know what your job is? And I'd look at him and be like, yes, sir. Take care of my troops. And how are you going to do that? And I'd be like, oh, get him out of the line of fire. I'm going to do this, going to do that, like giving him some tactical response. And then he just looked at me and he goes, and how are you going to do that? So he kept breaking it down, right? And I was like, well, he's like, your job is to make a decision. If you make the wrong decision, make another one, but make a decision and move. That's your job. That's two.
That's a good one.
And then number three, only ever be as tough as the situation dictates. Don't be walking into a situation, banging on your chest saying, look at me, look how tough I am. I want you to meld right in with whatever situation you're in and only map the toughness of the situation that's required. Those three I've carried with me ever since. And by the way, the first one, writing the just in case letter, I think I got one right here. That put me on the process of writing this first book, which is now in its third edition, Be Unstoppable, because Neil Roberts, who was in my STT class, he was in my sister platoon, he was the first SEAL to die in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when Neil died that a just in case letter was going to an 18-month-old boy. And Jennifer was just pregnant at that moment. And then I started writing just in case letters to the boys. Now I've been in the reserves, I think, at that point. But that was 10 years. That book is 10 years worth of false starts of writing those letters.
Those all really resonate. And one of them in particular that I find in the private sector myself, whether it's within my teams, my organization, or clients who I'm consulting or helping them recruit, is what I'll call paralyzed by the pursuit of perfection, analysis paralysis. I like on the one hand, make a decision and make another. You don't want to shoot from the hip. You don't want to be haphazard. But I found this a lot in the private sector. There's a lot of hand-wringing around getting it perfect before you do something. Whereas I think you and I were taught an 80-20 rule. It's not going to be perfect. Go do something and adjust. The environments we train for were extreme. You can't sit there and wait because the adversary is not going to wait for you to make the perfect decision. I'm curious about, as you personally moved into the private sector and took the lessons you learned from the military, how did those help you, whether it was founding and growing and selling your company, or even today as you're advising other companies? Like, I'm curious about what you've seen on the second theme you'd mentioned.
Okay, so on the first one, that was on the 3 points I offered up. The just in case letter, as I mentioned, really just became a reflection of what I wanted to give to the boys. And that became Be Unstoppable. And that's how I came up with the term unstoppable. I wanted them to be unstoppable at going after their dreams. And two, the other two, first and foremost, I really adopted when I had 3 false starts with my companies. I had started a company. Well, I guess it was 2.5 false starts. I started a company. It didn't work. And I tried in vain, but it became clear within 6 months it wasn't going to work. So I was like, all right, I got to shift. And then I went and started another one. And then that product didn't work. So I had to shift and create another product. And then I kind of lost the focus for a while because I stayed a little too long on one product because I thought we were just there. I thought, okay, just a little bit more. And it took me a little while to pivot from that one to the next product, which became the Perfect Pushup. And then that took off. and the subsequent businesses after that, I've become a lot less emotionally attached to the actual decision versus the driving to the outcome that I was seeking. And that became a process of detaching emotionally after the decision was made to be able to look at it and have other people look at it with a clear lens of saying, nah, that's not good enough. We got to go a different way. But in the beginning, I became very emotionally attached to the product, which, some days people come emotionally attached to their idea of whatever their decision is, and you really wanna be like, "Hey, get the ego out of this. Look, we're just after the best decision. Forget who came up with it." Right? And by the way, I write about that as an example when we were in Bosnia, and the best idea to keep the mission going was actually the most junior guy, who was from Iowa, Chris Kaplinger, right? He's the one who came up with the idea of, "Let's not use lasers, let's just dig a pothole to slow the car down to get the right picture." And that was an example of, okay, we made the right decision by letting the best decision win.
I like that. I've had to learn even myself sometimes. I had a mentor when I was earlier in my career in executive search where I was I would like get too emotionally attached to like that candidate is a great candidate, and I didn't put myself in the shoes of my client, and I tried to be right instead of like doing what was right for them, if that makes sense. And got emotional. I got fired from the search because I wouldn't let go. And that was like a look in the mirror moment and say, okay, you want to be right, or do you want to serve your client and get them the right decision for them? So it's swallowing your pride is actually a very important thing to do.
100%, Jamie. And just to finish this line of this questioning, the third piece I've probably used the most over the last 25 years of my life.
Tell me more about that.
And that third piece is only be as tough as the situation dictates. I'm calling that situational awareness, which we all got trained on, right? But situational awareness in SEAL team was more about kind of fine tuning. Okay, where are we at? What do we have to deal with? Where do we scale, right? The situational awareness here, when I was growing, and it was critical in the businesses, and I have several businesses. Well, I have two now still going today, a pet food company and my leadership development company. But in both cases, I had to get really curious with people with completely different backgrounds from me, and to show my interest and willingness to not go around and thump my chest, not even talk about SEAL team or how tough it was or anything, and actually highlight the artistry that they bring to the table. Uh, uh, Designers, uh, mothers. I end up speaking to a lot of women on stage, and going up on stage and talking about tough guy stuff isn't really the greatest call to action to connect with a lot of women. What you wanna connect to is tell a story about, like, how important my mother was to me, and allow yourself that ability to get really transparent and understand what that situation needed. And as I've become more adept at that, I've found greater success, and the success I'm really referring to is how to connect with others and build that trust to the point where they'd have enough faith in me to say, "Okay, I will follow his advice, and I'll go take action on this." Because that's the world I'm in today. I'm a leadership operating partner for a private equity firm. I do a lot of executive coaching, and then I'm on the speaking circuit and give about 50 speeches a year, and everything is word of mouth. And the only way that you get repeat business or you get someone saying, "No, you gotta bring this guy in," is you're adept at understanding what the situation dictates.
Yeah, rather than saying, "This is my framework, I'm gonna apply it to you regardless," right? Yeah,
Exactly.
square peg, round
And
hole.
you know
Oh,
that, right? You've gotta
yeah.
meet the client where they're at, not get the client to come up to you. You gotta go to them.
You talked about pushing through pain. I like the story of when you were a sophomore and you're like, "Hey, the rain will cover my tears, just whatever, no one's gonna know or no one's gonna care." Um, our mutual friend, Chris Cassidy, who's about to be honored as a distinguished graduate from the Naval Academy, asked me told me to ask you the story about the time it was the last day on a submarine, and there was about a 2 by 3 foot pizza, and someone bet if you could eat the whole thing. How did that pain of eating that whole thing compared to rowing that boat to make the team as a sophomore? How would you compare that? How'd you push through that one?
What Cassidy is not telling you on that particular, I got severely hypothermic on dive. That was all these mini subs, the classified combat mini submersibles, the SDVs, and he and I were at SDV Team 2, and I was actually at that point on the training cell because I'd already done a couple deployments, and he was the new up and comer. And so I was one of his instructors, and I'd been out on the water for like 12 hours or something, and I think we had said in one of the dive cylinders, like, "Man, if they made a whole sheet of pizza, I eat the whole thing." And they're like, "Sir, we're
And they
gonna
held you
hold you
to it.
to that." I'm like, "Bring it on."
Yeah, you got to be
Yeah,
careful what you ask for.
I
You know,
did. Obviously, that was self-induced pain versus the pain of actually going after something where I really wanted to be good at some sport, Jamie. And I'm not kidding you that I had scored against my own team on 4 different sports. And do you know how many times I was laughed off a field or I was the 4th line and there was no one else on the 4th line but you? And I just knew I could be good at some sport. I just didn't know what it was. Yeah. And then rowing, sitting on your butt going backwards for long periods of time, yeah, that's just a suffering sport. That's all that is, right? If you work hard at it, by the way, I was a wrestler. I was a varsity wrestler in high school. I you would look at it as probably intramurals for Connecticut wrestling, but I understood the pain of wrestling too. That was nowhere near your category, but that was one of those defining moments when I realized I could either embrace the pain and push through, or I could let the pain be my ceiling and hold me back. And once you start to have that kind of a relationship with what limiting factors in your life can be, it can be really freeing to know, okay, we're right at that edge. Now it's time. That's where the growth is. Now let's push through that. And go ahead, cry all you want. It's just weakness leaving the
just
body,
don't
right?
stop. Yeah. Well, I'm curious as I know I've known you for a long time. I don't see you ever stopping. You are like the Energizer Bunny. But let's just assume there's at some point in time you and Jen are gonna slow down a little bit and reflect on what you've done. Uh, Curious about what you would imagine your legacy being. Like, what did you contribute, and really helping the next generation of leaders and others to carry on what's important and what's worked for you.
Well, my first answer will always be he was a great father. That would be legacy number 1. To me, that's the single most important leadership opportunity, mother or father, because that's the real legacy. That becomes the force multiplier. And helping each of my 4 boys discover what their God-given talents are, and then learning how to apply their time, talent, and energy to put themselves in position to use the best of themselves to serve others. And when you can find that intersection, then I hope my boys will end up following in my footsteps And I hope my footsteps will represent, you hopefully outliving me because I'm a little older than you and saying, "Yeah, I wanna go the way Alden did. I'm gonna die with my boots on."
Yeah, man. Well, I really like that whole force multiplier effect, right? I think it's not about you. It's about like what are you doing to keep and to perpetuate that good energy and that leadership.
Yeah, so I guess if you were to extrapolate that legacy, it would be, helping people understand what their best talents are and inspiring them to use them every day and give it all they have to others. Because once you do that, you're not working anymore, right? You're giving the best of yourself, and it is so rewarding. You get so much more back from it.
Yeah, that's a big one. The legacy question is a big one. I don't know about you. I steal a lot of themes from other people and like to expand on them, but there's one or two authors that talked about the phases of life. There's three big ones before the fourth, which is you're fading into the sunset. The first one, those first 18, 22 years, you're a sponge. Everyone's investing in you, right? You're making sure you're doing what you can to prepare yourself. And that middle phase is like then you're building your foundation. You're putting on your mask before you help other people. I fly enough to use that corny analogy, and then I feel like I'm hitting that stage now where it's like I got my mask on, I'm good. Now it's a little bit more about, and once again, I think this is corny, but what's the name on the front of the jersey? Like the firm organization I'm with. What's that enduring legacy going to be?
Mhm.
More than the more than the name on the back. It's kind of fun to be at that part of your career where you're like, yeah, I'm still building my brand, but I don't want to be doing this forever. What's going to look like when I'm gone? I think it's like a nice way to think about life, and it sounds like you're in that third phase too, where you're having fun and you're not really feeling like you're working.
I jokingly call that building my ministry. Same thing, what you're
Oh,
talking
okay.
about, right? It's I'm so passionate about it that I'm building out the ministry of helping others help themselves. And if there is something that I've learned along the way, and by the way, I'm still learning, I'm not saying I know it all by any stretch of the imagination, but if I can, and every time I step on that stage, I think about if I can just help one person in that audience, then this will be a success today. And that is what I think of when I think about building the ministry of helping others.
Well, Alden, it's been great catching up. It's a bummer I'm not going to see you in Annapolis next week, but we'll see. We'll cross paths out there again pretty soon.
Jamie, it is such a pleasure. I am so in awe of what you're doing, and anytime I can be of service to you, know I'm a phone call away, brother. Keep doing it. You're doing great.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.